In this paper, we present 3 new approaches which allow us to perform 3D sound spatialization for thousands of sound sources. In particular, we present a recursive clustering algorithm which reduces the amount of time to create the clusters, a scalable premixing approach which allocates a budget for computation in frequency domain, based on a perceptual quality evaluation, and an audio-visual clustering criterion based on a perceptual pilot study of the influence of visuals on audio clustering. In this sequence, we have 1,800 sound sources, including footsteps of the pedestrians, car engine noises, bird sounds, and music from car stereos. The use of recursive clustering and scalable premixing, using only 15% of the original audio data, allows us to perform 3D audio spatialization in real time. We perform clustering to reduce the cost of 3D audio processing when a scene contains many sound sources. However, clustering can end up being expensive when the number of sources is large. To avoid this problem, we introduce a recursive approach. As we can see in this graph, the clustering is much faster using the recursive approach compared to the original method. A variant of this recursive approach was used in a commercial video game by Eden Games, Test Drive Unlimited. In this footage from the game, we show the sound clusters which are used in red. Once clustering has been performed, a remaining bottleneck is the cost of premixing the sources in a cluster. We can use a scalable approach in frequency domain by using only a fraction of the FFT coefficients to perform necessary processing for each source. The fraction is determined by an importance metric. We performed a perceptual quality evaluation for different metrics and presented a new algorithm which allows us to use a small percentage of the overall data with minimal degradation in quality. In this sequence, we vary the allocated budget from 0 to 100% to illustrate the principle. For this scene, a budget of 15% is acceptable. Below this level, we hear audio artifacts due to the loss of important frequency information, and above this level, the audio system cannot cope with the computation overload, resulting in cracking which can be heard clearly. In this sequence, we show the same scene with a 15% budget for the entire path. We switch to reference here to indicate that the approximation works well. For this sequence, a budget of 25% is satisfactory. One interesting question is whether there is an influence of visuals on audio clustering. To investigate this question, we performed a pilot study to determine whether it is best to have more clusters in the view frustum or outside the view frustum. A user is placed in front of the workbench screen as seen here. After a test to determine the most appropriate HRTF out of a small database of measured HRTFs and a subsequent training session, the user is presented with a screen which is either blank for the audio-only condition or contains visual objects which correspond to the sounds for the AV condition. At the top of the screen, the user has an information bar in which A, R, or B are highlighted. The user is instructed that R in the middle is the reference stimulus, while A and B are approximations. Using the joystick, the user has to compare A and B to R and rate them from no difference to clearly different. An example of an audio-only sequence is shown here. The difference identified here is probably due to a shift in the perceived localization of the bird. An example of the AV sequence is shown here. The difference identified here is probably due to a variation in the perceived position of the cow. The analysis of these tests gives a strong indication that it is better to have more clusters in the view frustum. Based on this observation, we developed a new clustering metric which encourages splitting of clusters for sources which are visible. In this sequence, we have constructed a situation where the new clustering metric avoids the pitfalls of the audio-only metric. The car on the right has a siren, and the stationary pedestrian on the left is humming. We switch between the audio-only or old metric, the reference, and the new audiovisual metric. We can clearly hear that for the old audio-only metric, the siren of the car is displaced spatially towards the center compared to the reference. For the new audiovisual metric, this artifact is reduced significantly. Here we see an illustration of the clusters where objects in the same cluster are shown with the same color. It is clear that the audio-only metric does not create enough clusters in the Viaud frustum in this configuration,